Ladies and gentlemen, I request all of you to please settle down and take your seats. Please clear the aisles and take your seats. We'll start shortly. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to all of you to the conference on safeguarding women and children from the impact of climate change, brought to you by ASSOCHAM. I'm your host, Anisha Nayyar Dhawan. International Women's Day is celebrated every year on March 8 to recognize women's achievements and mobilize efforts to increase awareness about gender equality and women's rights. Today's conference is going to be very special. We will have the first session where we have industry experts talk to us about their experience on inclusivity, on bringing up women, their colleagues, as equals and treating them fairly. And we are also very privileged that later in the evening today, we will be joined by the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, the Government of India, Ms. Smriti Irani. So there's a lot coming up for you during the course of the day today. Now, envisioning a vibrant and Viksit Bharat is impossible without the contribution, energy, and intelligence of India's women. We need support, sensitivity, and systemic change so that women-led development can propel Bharat to its next growth trajectory. Women will get a seat at the decision-making table once they are empowered with education, employment, good health, and financial inclusion. Today, we have distinguished thought leaders, renowned experts in their own respective domains, who will impart valuable insights on the importance of gender inclusivity and empowerment across all sectors. So without further ado, let's get started with our special session, Empowering Women to Empower the Nation, Leadership, Financial Inclusion, Health, and Education. Please put your hands together and welcome on stage our speakers for this session. Please welcome Mr. Rajiv Gupta, ASSOCHAM member, President PB FinTech, Policy Bazaar, and Paisa Bazaar. Please welcome him on the stage with a huge round of applause. Joining him on the stage are Ms. Dakshita Das, former Additional Secretary, Department of Financial Services, Government of India. Dr. Amita Suneja, President, Association of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Delhi, AOGD. Please also welcome Ms. Purvi J. Bhavsar, Co-founder and Managing Director, Pehel Financial Services. Please welcome Dr. Madhu Vij, President, GRMI and Board Member, SRCC and LBSIM. Please welcome Ms. Aditi Singh, Head Strategy, Saturn Credit Care Network, and Mr. Vishal Kedia, Co-Chairperson, ASSOCHAM Empowerment Council and Founder and Director, Comply Karo. Please give our esteemed speakers a huge round of applause. We are looking forward to hearing their views, their beliefs, and their experiences on taking women along with them. I'll hand it over to Rajiv ji to give us the opening remarks and steer this discussion.
Thank you. It's okay if I do it from here? Yes, sir. Perfect, thank you. So good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to welcome each one of you for this very special, panel, which is going to discuss empowering women and thereby empowering the nation. So I think it's one of the most discussed subject today, and I think it requires the necessary importance, and that is why with me I have today one of the most eminent panels and some of the most successful women leaders present here. My question is, empowering women to empower the nation. I'm unsure whether we really need to empower them at the first place. When we see all the successful women here, I'm not sure whether they got empowered or they took the initiative to do what they did. Whether it is government, whether it is medical, whether it is education, we have some of the most successful women present here, and I'm sure if we talk to them, you will find that it is the interest they took, it is the opportunity they seized to be successful in their respective fields, what we see them today. I have myself worked under some of the most successful women in the corporate world. I was in ICICI, so we had a lot of women leaders there, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with them. So you had a lot of successful women leaders across the industry, even in those days. When I say those days, I'm talking about more than 2 decades back. Things are changing. I would really earnestly request that every woman present here or not present here should seize the opportunity, because you are no different from anybody else. I think women, in my opinion, today are powerful, and if this country has to grow, if 50% of the population are women, I think we are missing out on the 50% growth if women are not taking their place and contributing to the development of the economy. So I personally feel that this is one area where all of us as equal human beings should contribute and encourage more and more women to come forward, whether we are in our corporates or whether we are sitting at home. It starts from home first, right? Why do we all expect as men that after office hours, when the men and women come back home, it is expected that the women will do all the other work? It is true in every house, not that I am different, but that is where we have to probably bring about the change. How do you expect a woman to be successful at workplace and also come back and take the extra load of children and family, when they come back home? So these are questions we will answer, during the panel, and I think I will probably start off, with an introduction of each panel member. I would request, each one of you to self-introduce yourself. I think instead of reading your profile, it will be much better that if each one of you can briefly tell us, what you are and what have you done so far,
Yeah, okay. So my name is Vishal Kedia. I'm co-chair for the Empowerment Council at ASSOCHAM, and I'm also the founder for Comply Karo. So as the name suggests, with Comply Karo, we basically help companies with compliances and regulatory training. So we do a lot of work in the D&I space, and similarly, we work a lot in the ethical space also. So with respect to today's topic, we work extensively in the prevention of sexual harassment for women.
Thank you, Vishal.
Very good morning. I'm Dr. Amita Suneja. I'm Director, Professor, and Head of the Department Ops Gynae at University College of Medical Sciences and Guru Tegh Bahadur Hospital. And I graduated from Delhi Maulana Azad and then in the academics. And it is attached to a 1400 bedded Guru Tegh Bahadur Hospital, and we are having 20,000 deliveries per annum. So it's a very, very heavy workload department, and all the social issues, very poor patients approach us. And now I'm the president of our association of Ops Gynecologists of Delhi. We have a strength of 4,000 gynecologists in Delhi. And the national body is FOXY, which has a strength of 40,000 gynecologists. And we have subcommittees, and we keep a lot of social work, public awareness committee, adolescent committee. And so we deal with the women's, the girl child, the adolescent issues, menopausal issues, and the women health. And that's what we are doing, along with the clinical work. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Vita. I think that's a big work. Ma'am?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dakshita Das, a retired civil servant. My presence over here is on 2-3 accounts, one of which is that during 2004, the government introduced something called gender budgeting in Indian documents. And given the fact that I was handling that, I became some kind of a unwritten author for that. Currently, therefore, in my current avatar, post-retirement, I was heading a committee for gender budgeting reform, and I'm consultant for United Nations for Women at present. Apart from that, I'm operating on the Institute of Chartered Accountants as a government nominee, and I'm also functioning on several boards. I write a lot on gender issues, and I have several published articles, most of which are available on LinkedIn. But yes, I can say that post-retirement, I'm one of the many Indian women who inhabit India.
Thank you so much, Dakshita Das ji. I think I have had the opportunity to know you earlier as well. I think that your contribution, in terms of reforms, both in the fintech and insurance space, has been significant. And thank you for whatever you've done so far, and thank you for what you're doing. I now come to you, ma'am.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and share my views or thoughts. I am Purvi Bhavsar. I am co-founder and managing director for Pahel Financial Services. We are a NBFC MFI, the microfinance institution. Co-founded this company about 13 years back. Before that, I was working for financial institutions and telecom for about 17 years. So in all 30 years that I have been professionally active in this space. Very passionate about financial inclusion, and that's where I left my job and co-founded this company, where I wanted to be a solution giver rather than being cribbing all the time about all the issues that's going around. Personally, I'm very passionate about creating awareness about the impact of climate on vulnerable communities, because they are the ones who are going to suffer the most. The way the climate events are shaping up, and it's likely to impact particularly in India, because we are a huge country and we have a lot of people who are likely to suffer. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Purvi ji. I think we have two, successful people on the microfinance side, and when we talk about inclusion and your contribution to, to women in those parts of the world, of the country, I think you guys are playing a significant role in ensuring financial literacy, in most villages and talukas of this country. Thank you so much for being here. Over to Professor Madhu.
Yeah, good morning. I had been with Lady Shriram College, and then most of my life taught at the Faculty of Management Studies in the area of finance, international finance, banking. In Delhi University, had a lot of roles to play. I'm very passionate about my role, wherein I was looking after the Women's Study and Development Center, which exposed me to a lot of issues, could be microfinance, could be inclusion. Post my superannuation from there, involved with a lot of management institutes, working in various areas. Also, as an independent director in a few companies, just finished my term in the Institute of Company Secretary as a government nominee, and now involved full-time as the president of a risk management professional institute based in Gurgaon, which is known as the Global Risk Management Institute. But thank you for the invitation here.
Thank you, Dr. Madhu. I think education is significant, and your experience in this field will certainly help us, to really promote education in the areas where we want to to bring in this equality which we are all talking about today. I think, and you have already played a major role. And with your knowledge, in this field, I'm sure we can get guidance in terms of how do we promote education across the country so that people, understand why financial literacy is important, and particularly women start taking the lead in the families, which probably has started in tier 1 cities. I'm not saying it's already gone big, but I think tier 2, tier 3 cities have a long way to go, and education will play a significant role there. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm honored to be here. I don't know what did I do to deserve to be in the company of such amazing women, but yeah, my name is Aditi Singh, and I'm Head Strategy for Satin Credit Care, which again is an NBFC MFI. We are present across 1 lakh villages of India, and are glad to be associated with 34 lakh women who are all successful micro-entrepreneurs. My role at Satin as head strategy is, of course, finance is a main course, but other than that, I also look after issues like SPM, where I work in financial literacy and women's health and insurance, ESG, and even the recovery data analytics and the other stakeholder management. So when Rajiv, you mentioned about it starts at home. So that's what we try to do in microfinance. We provide women a means to generate some income in the realms of their home. So we do a doorstep delivery of financial services. And I totally agree with you, because we have seen how this impacts and how somebody who's completely invisible, only there to serve people, and the moment she's financially empowered, she's taking an active role in uplifting the family from the clutches of poverty, how her importance changes in the house, in the society, in her village. So thank you, and happy Women's Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think truly significant, I have seen, company, and I think one of the oldest microfinance institutions, particularly you built that, big business in the north, which was not existent before. I remember SKF was there in the south, but the kind of role you have played, in creating the need, in across probably, I think, thousands of villages, in the country, lakhs, I would say. But that is really, truly significant. And I think the concept of employing, people from those towns who are not necessarily highly educated and allowing them to work from home, making them one amongst, the people to whom you lend, is certainly innovative and certainly creditworthy to mention here. I think, thank you so much, for whatever you do and whatever your company does in this industry. So I think, thanks for lovely introduction. My name is Rajiv Gupta. I work for a company called PB Fintech Limited that runs 2 large brands. We have many other subsidiaries, Policy Bazaar and Paisa Bazaar. So let me tell you, at PB Fintech Group, we encourage diversity a lot. I think today 40% of our employees are women across board, and even on the management side, though we are not 50-50, we are at about 31% currently, and we certainly aim to take this ratio to equal. Unfortunately, the availability of resources is also becoming a challenge. So when we debate this topic today, it is important to also discuss how do we create resources from the school level or from your home level to encourage more and more women to qualify and to be there available. I think the future is certainly equal ratio, and I think we will need to work on that to contribute to have this scenario maybe in the next decade where we have equal ratios across most corporates. Thank you so much. I think I will start off with a question to all the panelists here. I'll request you, ma'am, to begin. In the independent India, ma'am, how far have we reached in empowering women to empower our nation? And what, according to you, is the definition of gender equality today for a better and sustainable tomorrow?
It's a good question, because India has been actually a leader in terms of giving the framework for women and gender equality, gender mainstreaming. We should never forget that the Constitution was a great creator of equal rights for women, and nowhere has it played out more than in the electoral patterns. And in the 2019 election, we found that women had marginally overtaken men as far as exercising their voting rights are concerned. But while we host the largest population of women in the world, we have a problem. And the problem is that there exists two Indias as far as women are concerned. There is the thinking women, a lot of us who are sitting on stage, a lot of us who are sitting across me and patiently listening to us. And then there is that India which operates in cities which are tier 2, tier 3, and let's say agriculture. And that's where the real crisis is happening. We are still stuck in social norms of a very antique type. We have an issue even on a basic perception in the households. The recent NFHS survey has indicated that the usage of internet and access to mobile phones in rural India is tilted more for the male child as opposed to the female child. And that's merely a perception issue. But India is changing rapidly. The Asian Games, which were conducted last year, held a great testimony to the fact that the number of women participants, whereas till a time ago we used to say, oh, there is one Anju Bobby George in a game or one PT Usha. Last year we couldn't stop applauding our women because they've come from rural India. And that's where the biggest game is happening. And the last point which I wish to make is that the government in the last decade or so has done some very rapid innovations to mainstream women into decision making, self-awareness, financial independence. That only gives a roadmap because it will take another, I think, decade or so before the Indian woman, which is coming from the non-urban or maybe the non-elite or the non-upper income group, to achieve her own individuality. For me, it's not a question of gender equality, it's a question of gender neutrality. That's my...
Well said, ma'am, well said. I think I'll move to Dr. Madhu. Dr. Madhu, I think the most important question when it comes to answering this question which I had addressed to everybody is, in your opinion, in the last 3 decades, since you've been associated with education for a long time, have you seen a big change, I mean, while addressing this question, in terms of how many girl childs are really coming forward and continuing their education? I mean, I know that our exposure is predominantly in tier 1, but I'm sure you have a good access to what happens in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Is that changing? Is that changing in the independent India today? You know?
So thank you for the question. Yes, I would say things have changed. Not maybe a 360 degrees change, but yes, it has. You know, if I go back to the days when I remember when I was appointed at the Faculty of Management Studies, probably I was the only women faculty there. And the thought, you know, in the entire male-dominated B school was, oh, what do we do with her now? And then slowly that whole focus has changed. You know, and what I also believed in my earlier years was, nobody is going to empower me. My education is one which helps me stand on my own 2 feet. And as our chairperson said, it starts from within. It starts from the family. So if your parents have given you encouragement, then we really need to pass it on to the future generation. And there's another instance which comes to my mind. You know, I do remember in an educational institution, you are teaching, and in the first few years, maybe the 80s and the 90s, we had very few girl students also who were opting for a management course. And the surprising thing was, a lot of them would get great opportunities, great career jobs, but then there was a phenomena which some of us called, and in fact now it is given a proper term, which is called a leaky pipeline. What happens is that as you go ahead with a career progression, somewhere down, maybe, you know, when you are in your early 30s, that's the time you have to build your career, and that's the time you have to take care of family also. So I think it's there where the role of the companies and the role of the government has come forward. So one knows a lot of organizations, and it started with a lot of multinationals who came up with a lot of initiatives. Could be a crèche in the office, could be other facilities, you know, which helped women retain their job. So how do we ensure that, you know, the young girls in or during the time when there is a dual demand on them, you know, we help them. So could be work from home, could be other career initiatives, and that is what I've seen with a lot of our young women executives. One more point which I would like to add here is, as a professor, you know, you do a lot of research. So you get a lot of young doctoral candidates. Now, finance is typically thought to be a male-dominated area. And girls would go a little less because of the competitive part there. So I do remember when, you know, a young girl would come to me for her doctoral dissertation, her mother would also come with her. And the requirement would be, we only want a female mentor for her. You know, that's what the family demands. But this has definitely changed over a period of time. So my comment here would be that you definitely need mentors, and you definitely need to give a little push to our young girls when they are in that difficult stage of deciding where the balance is. But thank you for your question.
I think very well said, ma'am. I recall yesterday in my office, I was talking to our group legal counsel, who happens to be a woman, you know, and I asked her this question about, because I was coming here today, and she said, Rajiv, aren't we at fault? You know, because even at our homes, when we have a son and a girl, if the girl wants to go out, you know, and if it is dark, we say, let him accompany you, or I will accompany you, you know. And that's the kind of fear psychosis indirectly we create, not because we want to, but all of us as parents are always worried, you know, that should I send my daughter alone? And that's something we start building, you know, at a very young level, and that thought process is on in their mind. And yesterday in my own family, my son and daughter were debating about, you know, this topic. And somewhere, you know, she's a 16-year-old, and I must tell you that she's been doing my banking since last 6 years. I mean, she does entire banking for me, my net banking. And she was answering back to her brother, who's an IIT pass out and he's working in, you know, Halliburton, that we don't need any special favors, you know. And she said that, he said that you get a favor at IIT, there's a quota for women. She said, I don't want any quota. I mean, why do we need quota? She says, so then I had to explain to her, why is this being done today to encourage more and more women to come forward? But today women are not asking for any favors. I think that's the beauty of it. At least in tier 1 cities, they understand equality means we will fight for our place. Don't treat us, you know, as a weaker section or give us any favors, you know. I'll come back to you, doctor. I think you've probably in your lifetime handled, you know, so many women. And I think, do you get the feeling that in this independent country, India today, have we started empowering women? I mean, to take even decisions like whether they are ready to be a mother, whether, you know, whether they're getting their say in deciding, you know, in matters which is very personal, you know. So I think if you can touch upon those aspects, what was earlier and what do you see today? You know?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I deal with type 2 India. So the women are very poor. And I will call gender equality first defined according to the health definitions, which I have thought over, that if the woman has an equal opportunity to seek health services, or if she has the empowerment to make informed choices about her reproductive health, about family planning, and about promotional and the preventive health. Or if there is no sexual violence, no sexual harassment, no domestic violence, I will call it as gender equality. And she should be, I'll give you small data. Last year in 2023, January to December, we had 266 cases of sexual assault. And out of these, 130 were under POXO, that is less than 18 years. So 50% are almost POXO. And so where is the gender equality? Even today, we are seeing so many cases like this. And I will say gender equality is if there is, the similar wages and no work harassment at the workplace as it is for the men. And there's a freedom of thought and freedom of action is gender equality. So I see very poor part of India. It is improving. There is progressive change. Women are empowered to make decisions, but it is always there. Sometimes the women are dominating the women. In North India, it is the mother-in-law who is dominating their decisions. So it is not the men, rather it is the women. So there are many barriers, but still there are miles to go before the gender equality comes in Type 2 India. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll now come to Vishal, because we've discussed with some very strong women about their view. You work on legislation a lot. You work with the government. Do you really see that empowering women in India today is becoming much more easier? Is the legislation supporting them? Is the government supporting them in their initiatives? Just an introductory.
Yes, so I definitely think legislation is actually going the right way with regards to empowerment of women. I don't want to say that we've reached there. It's a journey. We've just started, I think. But if you look at statistics across various stuff, you will find that empowerment has happened. And I actually just kind of tried to pull out a few statistics regarding that. So basically, with regards to economic participation, the government periodic labor force survey, which was released in February this year only, talked about female urban participation is 25% now as compared to 21% in 2020. In rural, it has actually increased a lot more. It's 34.6% as compared to 21.7% in 17-18. And I think so partly we can talk about because male migration is there. So there are those rural opportunities which are there in the rural area because of which this is disproportionate. As far as education is concerned, and when we're talking from an independence till date, literacy rate is at this point of time 77% as compared to 9% when we became independent. In the rural area, it's lower at 67.77%. In political representation, Lok Sabha 14.36, Rajya Sabha 11.13. And again, in December, we have this reservation, one-third, which will actually go up. Entrepreneurship, a decade back, 14%, 20%. Mortality, maternal mortality rate has gone down to 103 from 384, which is actually 3 times the world average. So a lot of these things have actually happened because of legislation. So you have the Maternity Act, which they were talking about the leaking pipeline. So the Maternity Act talks about 26 months leave, along with creche facility. Posh, when you spoke about, Anita spoke about women empowerment, you will find companies where women are coming forward and speaking out as to things that have gone wrong with them. So legislations across, I think so, had a great role in defining a social construct.
Thank you, Vishal. I'll now come to Purviji. You decided to move out of the corporate world and start a venture of your own, I remember the other day in the Times of India event, somebody mentioning a young lady. She said, I went to, someone to register my GST. And that guy looked at her with shock as to why do you need a GST? So she said, I felt insulted, that just because I'm a young lady and I'm starting something, I go to a consultant saying that aap mera GST registration kar dijiye. And that is very recent. Obviously, you've gone through this venture many years ago. Do you really see this as a big factor even today? When you started up, it'll be interesting to know what happened then, and how do you see, this today in your lens, through your lens?
Okay, a very interesting question. So, when I started as an entrepreneur, I had already spent 17 years to at least, stand very confidently in front of somebody and ask for any such registration. So, I never had to go through that. But, of course, when I started 30 years back working in a, NBFC as a very small off-roll employee, I was made to cry almost every other day. And I was also very fragile because I was also a very pampered child in a way that, nobody ever shouted at you, nobody ever questioned you. It was all trust, a lot of support, but I was never used to that, pressure, the smallest of pressure. But I realized it very soon that if I will cry, I will keep crying for rest of my life. But if I really want to grow up and, live my dream, then I'll have to be confident. I'll have to be respected for whatever I'm doing. Howsoever small work I'm doing, I should be respected. And first, I should be able to stand up for myself. Unless I do that, nobody else is going to do that. Unless I give that importance or unless I am able to show that confidence, nobody else will do that. So I learned those lessons pretty early in my life. And that's what I think, made me survive for such long years in a very, very male-dominated world. Not in a classroom, as ma'am said, but even during my corporate career, when I was in a senior management kind of a role, in a room full of, the managers, I was the only woman. I was the only, area manager, cluster head, because I have always been on the business side. And even when I see a lot of female working for banks, they're mostly in support functions. They are in IT, HR, customer services, but very few in the customer-facing function because it's very target-oriented, lot of pressure, and lot of, stress on the working hours. You can't leave when you want to leave. You have to stay back. There are audits. There are a lot of issues. So, but standing up for yourself and demand that you earn that respect. I think rather than demanding for it, I think you have to earn it and you have to be very confident for yourself. That solves all the problem.
I think when I heard you, I also recall having heard Sudha Murthy once, on TV, where she said when I joined the engineering college, she was the only woman, and there was no ladies' toilet, in that college, and everybody was looking at her with surprise as to what is she doing here, and we've all seen what Sudha Murthy has done, both through her indirect contribution to building Infosys and what she has done today, as a social activist across the country.
I just want to say one thing, on women empowerment and what your daughter was saying, very interesting. I think that is exactly what I also feel, and I have lived this. Empowerment does not mean, what does women empowerment mean to me personally? And it's being architect of my own destiny. And to do that, I need equal opportunity. I need that environment which is very enabling, where I'm not, I don't want any special concessions, freebies, or some special incentives for working, for not working, a lot of flexibility. Treat me the way I am. Consider me equal to any man in this room, and go by the merit and don't go by my gender. I think that's the only thing that I have ever asked for. I don't allow anybody to treat me any different in a room full of men. And I think that's what a woman wants.
Wonderful. I think so. Well said. I think I'll come to you, Aditi ji. You have demonstrated through your organization, the ability to kind of empower women across this country, and so obviously this question is still addressed to you. How did you? We'll come back to your specific question later, but you were able to do this so well, and empowering women is something which your organization has been doing, and I think I heard you saying that in your own team, large proportion of people are women, and probably you're trying to challenge that as well, as to is it consciously women, or is it, is it by design, or is it something which you want to challenge? Interesting. So why don't you share your thoughts on where we are as a country? While your organization has done a great job, but do you see the same thing happening across, around you, across the country, and do you get a feeling that things are moving at a pace at which it should move today?
So I'll answer the easy question first. It was by design that I have an all-woman team, including in field, in collections, which is, as Purvi rightly said, high demanding functions. But what we have seen is once we hire them, we empower them, they are actually, for a woman, it is like she has to then get into this zone that she has to perform 200%. But that works for me, so yeah, they are motivated, they are working. Now, how did we begin, Rajiv, is very interesting. Because when we talk about financial inclusion and about a woman being able to borrow, I'll give you my example. I bought a house last year. You can congratulate me later. So when I applied for the bank loan, I told my husband I'm buying it in my name and I will look after the EMIs, etc. In the household, it was cool. Maybe because I'm empowered, I'm privileged, and I could have that call. But when I applied for a bank loan, everybody looked at me with suspicion. House in your name? Why? Aren't you married? Oh, you're married. Are you separated? No. Is there some problem? Okay, now we get this. Your husband must be a defaulter and you don't want to put him on the application and you're buying the house alone. I showed my salary sheet that I can very well afford this house and the EMIs and some more. My ego got bruised. I ended up telling that guy, तेरे जैसे 500 मेरी team में हैं. Anyway. But what we do on the contrary, we go to rural India and we only lend to women. That's a radical shift. I speak from privilege, Rajiv. I live in Gurgaon, I work in an organization, have some whatever authority I have. We go to village, we lend to these women who, like I earlier said, they are invisible. No one even looks at them, no one counts them as important. We go to their household. So we started actually from Bulandshahr, which is western UP, the most notorious part of UP. And it was, unfortunately in India, we talk a lot about demographics and religion, a Muslim-dominated area. Could we go to their house and acquire clients? We did. You will be surprised, in UP, everyone said it was a bad land. For the first 100,000 loans, there was zero delinquency. These women never defaulted on their repayments. Can you actually bring a group of 20 men? I see so many men sitting here. Will you give guarantee for each other? If Mr. X will not pay, Mr. Y will chip in? Never. So while we say women are not there to help each other, but what we have seen in microfinance and joint liability group, whether it is the case of Bangladesh, where very successfully the Grameen model was proven successful, or in India. So we have 7.4 crore borrowers across India who are the beneficiaries of microfinance. So that's how we began, and we understood that and again, microfinance was very South specific. Society is better, women are considered to be, treated more equitably over there. We started in the worst ever possible perceived area, and still we could show success. That means women are same everywhere. You just have to reach to them, you have to empower them, you have to hold their hand. And then we saw the results.
Yeah, wonderful. I think I have been part of State Bank for a decade, the life insurance side. And I used to hear about self-help groups, in those days, which were the institutions through which they used to cover their lending for microfinance. And I think you've done a great job in creating the self-help groups, and particularly self-help groups of women. When I come to you next, I'll obviously ask you what challenge these women face from their husbands.
I'll add one more thing here before you move to the next speaker, since I have the mic in my hand. So actually, we had a delegation from Myanmar, and they wanted to learn what is India doing so, because Indian microfinance industry is, I think, one of the most well-regulated and matured industries in the world, wherever you go. So they came here, they came to our office. First, they were surprised, why am I teaching them all? So they were a group of 30 odd men. And during the discussion, I kept saying she, referring to my borrowers. So one of them asked, why are you saying she? I said, our borrowers are only women. They were just flabbergasted, because in India only we are doing, in Bangladesh we are doing all women, in Myanmar it was men. They used to lend microfinance loans to men. So that's how far we've come across.
Thank you so much. I think such interesting observations and experience which has been shared by all of our panelists. I'll now come to you, ma'am, again, on a specific question. You've been a pioneer in the field of, finance, be it public finance or infrastructure finance. The list goes on. How would you narrate your journey has been like in this field and where we see very few women leaders, What is your guidance to young women aspiring to make it big in the financial services sector?
There are two parts to this again. In the financial sector, see, as a bureaucrat, it's gender neutrality is a fairly fair obvious, because recruitment is not happening on gender lines, and eventually on-seat performance depends on how hard you work. You work, you deliver, and you are able to make a name for yourself. Personally, when I hear other panelists, not here alone, other places, I'm a little taken aback because my journey has been very smooth. I worked in an area called the budget division, where we used to make budgets, which meant late nights, which meant nights in the office, which meant you did it with very small child at home and with a husband who was also working. And we were all women, by the way. My boss, my super boss, apart from the minister, we were all women. We were all working late. It didn't matter. I mean, it just didn't matter. And we had no issues of any kind. Until today, we are the closest friends because we worked together like that. And a lot of us did very well because of that very focused thinking at that point of time. And the focused thinking was, you have to deliver. And that is what is the crux of the financial sector also. You have to discard any issues. You have to look at company targets. Anybody who's in the financial sector space is looking at bottom lines. They are not looking at equity. The principle of equity is only at the point of recruitment. You cannot expect anything beyond that. You've been recruited, that's big enough. The rest of it, gaining the self-confidence, gaining the knowledge to perform, and knowing what your entity's targets are, those are things which you have to figure out in your own mind. And I may sound very harsh when I say it, but it's only an entry-level advantage which you need, which the government is giving, as you have mentioned. You get the entry-level advantage. For the rest of it, it's all in your hand. You've got to design, you've got to create, you've got to get your confidence. A lot of women in the financial sector or even other corporates, if they are reduced to HR functions, I say it's their problem. You might find women topping the chartered accountancy or the CS exam. But when it comes to riding a horse or climbing a mountain in the corporate world, they don't do that. Why? Because midway they just say, I'm a woman. What do you mean you're a woman? You are not. In the workspace, learn. Because the growing sector is the financial sector. India is one of the leading economies. India is going to be the leader. And the way we are going to need financial services, it's huge. Women bring a lot to it, like we've heard our co-panelists. They go to rural areas, they reach out to women. Women to women interaction is much smoother than, say, male to woman in such areas. So I would suggest that in the workspace, we need to really figure out what we need to deliver.
I'll just quickly ask you a counter question, ma'am, that when you joined the civil services many years ago, obviously you mentioned that you had colleagues who were also women. The ratio then and the ratio today, do you see a lot of women getting encouraged, to be part of, this prestigious service? And is that increasing by the year,
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be a civil servant. Everybody and their amma, whether you are male, female, or any other thing. The issue is this, that it's a very fair exam because it's only an exam which is based on neutrality. Larger number of girls are qualifying largely because a lot of Indian middle class families are focusing on the education of their children. And the middle class is becoming smaller in size. And that's where, whether it's a daughter or a son, and the psychological orientation towards both notwithstanding, you are finding that girls are doing very well. My own college, Lady Shri Ram College, has ever since 2016, we had Tina Dhabi topping. It's become a very popular college for girls to come there and to study so that they can qualify the civil services. But the journey in the civil service is not the qualification. The journey in the civil services starts once you are inside. And that is the problem, because actually you are in a leadership role there. So, I mean, you can aspire and say that, wow, there's glamour, and wow, there's this, and I saw this OTT platform and this thing on Netflix, and it looks very powerful. But actually the journey is only of the self.
Thank you so much. Vishal, you did mention about legislation, and ASSOCHAM is one of the leading associations of the country, and you also co-chair their empowerment council. I'm sure you are through ASSOCHAM working with the government very closely. So what kind of effort have you seen by ASSOCHAM and your team to ensure that you work with the government to take this to the next level when it comes to women empowerment?
So with ASSOCHAM, we've been making regular representations to the government with regards to what could be the shortfalls as far as laws are concerned. Again, recently, as far as the POSH Act, they have made amendments because they've seen that it is very difficult for women to come forward and make a complaint within a reasonable time, and earlier reasonable meant 3 months. So now they've spoken about a longer period of time. Similarly, there were instances of coercion happening with regards to conciliation, so they've removed the option there. We do a lot of surveys along with ASSOCHAM, and out here the Empowerment Council is not limited to women only. It's basically POXO, children, we're talking about HIV, transgender. There are several laws which have already come in, which the corporate world is not even aware. So doing surveys around them, doing webinars around them, so at least we talk about those things which are not there in the public space. We also have D&I awards, we have women-centric programs which are there where we honor various organizations. As far as our company, my company Comply Karo is we do a lot of these analysis, statistics surveys around this. So again, if I don't know most of the people, whether they are aware or not, that going forward, like this year, basically SEBI has come out with a ESG rating parameters. So basically one of the rating parameters where on which corporates will be rated will be, you have to disclose salaries and on the basis of gender. So basically that will be something which is there. They have something called the Parivartan score also, where you create a baseline across sectors and then see how you've changed stuff. So we basically, again, looking at those things. Again, they are providing a lot of statistics in the BRSR report, which is there for the top 100 companies. So looking at how those trends are changing. So this is what we do. On the POSH Act, obviously, we do a lot. We've done trainings for more than 50,000 committee members, done sensitization for more than 50 lakh employees. What we've also seen is the interplay between rights of people with disability and women. So as much as we're talking about gender equality, when we talk about women having disability, then I'm just saying the marginalization which happens out there is extreme. So basically these are things which we've seen, and again, we're trying to play our role to see how we can kind of, I would say, advise companies or guide them so that change can be brought about.
Wonderful, Vishal. I think thanks for the effort. I think ASSOCHAM and you guys have done a great job. And I'm sure going forward, we will see more work in this space. Ma'am, I come to you. Doctor, you've just heard Vishal saying that there are a lot of women-centric policies, be it maternity leaves or maybe government support. Since you have been in the forefront of women and child healthcare in India, can we explain to our audience how women's healthcare and empowerment walk hand in hand for a better tomorrow?
So, the one field in which we have really made an improvement is, I'll give you the example, maternal mortality ratio. And in 2016, it was 120 maternal deaths per 1 lakh live births. And then, National Health Policy had the target of bringing it down to less than 100 by 2020. And now in 2020, it was 97. So that target was achieved. And SDG goal is by 2030, we should bring it down to 73. And we are quite hopeful to get it because of political will. Women-centric many programs, GSY, GSSK, where education of women and education of men also, they are coming for the institutional deliveries. There are many monetary incentives for them to come. So they are getting empowered, they are seeking healthcare, and they know the maternal health is very important. So that is one good example. And also the medical fraternity is doing a lot to create awareness, the public awareness programs, and giving them the facilities. And and two things I want to mention here, and that could be a carry-home message, that instead of talking big, taking all the agendas at a time, take 1 or 2 agendas at a time. And like now our slogan of our association is, make Bharat anemia mukt, make Bharat cancer cervix mukt. Anemia is such a simple thing. We are making public aware, women aware, get one hemoglobin done, and then if hemoglobin is less, because it will lead to a healthier society, healthier women's health if there's no anemia. Second, for CS cervix, cancer cervix, WHO has a global strategy, and they say it is a public health problem. We should eradicate it, eliminate it by 2030. India is lagging behind. That we could not do. But now in the recent cabinet budget allocation, our honorary finance minister has allocated budget to HPV vaccination. This is the only cancer where vaccine is available. And now we really want to vaccinate our girls. It will be in the national program, and we will eliminate cancer cervix. And a lot of educational activities, public awareness activities are going, and women are coming forward to vaccinate their daughters, to convince others to get, even the men are involved in that. So you have to, so carry home message for today's gathering also. Please get your daughters vaccinated from 9 to 15 years by HPV. We have indigenous vaccine by Serum Institute of India, like the COVID vaccine. So it is now cheaper. So 1 dose or 2 doses is good enough for the vaccination. So that's the carry home message I would like to give.
Thank you. I just quickly ask you one add-on question to this. Medicine is generally, perceived to be a field which women first, choose when they want to do a professional degree. It's perceived, and when it comes to gynecology, again, there is a strong belief that it should be a woman in the gynecology. So have you started seeing that change the other way around, where you also started seeing men, coming into this field and are able to do what you have been doing for women all this while, in this sense?
See, as a professional, choice, men, if you see the Gujarat, South, the western part of India, South India, Kolkata, they are dominated by male gynecologists. It is in North India where there are only female gynecologists. So that way there is no gender. The women do go to the male gynecologist, and they are actively involved in the all health programs and the public awareness. Our Foxy president is male, Dr. JP Tank. And involvement of men in the maternity journey of the mother, that is also an important issue. So if we create, but that is very hard to do. It is change in behavior. We have to see the social background, their cultural taboos, how to involve the men in the journey of the pregnant woman. So that a lot of effort has to be made in that to bring the change.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Madhu, I'll come to you now. We touched upon legislation, we spoke to her about the health. So when it comes to education, again, I will also probably repeat this question slightly differently. I gave you the example of Sudha Murthy when she was the lone, person while doing engineering. So when you see a lot of women, coming into education, and at the school level or at the college level, do you see a lot of encouragement, which is happening today in terms of helping women to choose different careers? Or do you see more and more women leading to what I just asked, ma'am, that they come with a set mind because they have been influenced all this while at their homes, by their own parents, or while doing schooling? So do you see active participation from educational institutions today to encourage women to see areas which they have not seen before? It could be, mining, it could be petroleum engineering, it could be, I mean, sales and marketing. So do you see that happening, as a change today?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question because, yes, we do have a lot of lectures, a lot of career goals, and I've also been a part of them. And all schools, and I would say even educational institutions across the country. So it could be tier 1, yes, we do expect, but both tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where I've also been, in terms of helping students choose a career path, And when it comes to career choices, you're very right. Whatever your parents or maybe your relatives or somebody who's been successful in his or her own field does influence a lot. And the good part is that from the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, where the mindset of most of the parents was, only if you do medicine or you get into an engineering, you're really worth it. If you're going to go for an arts or a journalism or any other course, you're not good enough. Fortunately, that mindset has changed. And let me also, on this note, mention our national education policy, which has come up and it has been very, very timely. You come across a lot of students and a lot of young girls, and I would like to be a little more gender neutral on this. Our national education policy talks of various initiatives which were probably on paper or probably unheard of, which have come into the limelight now. For example, something like taking a year off, which could be as simple as that, but probably was not viewed very, very kindly at a point of time. Or something which they are calling as the academic bank of credit. I could be going anywhere across, maybe across the globe also, and my credits would get accumulated. So I think various initiatives like this help the students choose a career which is, of their interest. And since you mentioned mining, what comes to my mind is, for 3 years, I was an independent director in a mining company. And what I recollect is, when we were going down the mine, it was a bucket-like of a structure, where we 3 of us could get into the bucket, and with a rope, they took us to the last floor. And yes, the CEO asked me, "Would you like to go, ma'am?" I said, "Yes, why not?" But the question was not asked to the others, maybe out of consideration only. But that kind of, change is something which we all need to bring. And before I give the mic back, one more point. Even when one has ventured into the area of finance, you could feel that understanding the balance sheet, understanding the income statement, or let me put it as understanding numbers, is not in your domain. But no, we can smell the coffee. We know what it is. So that is where the whole mindset has changed. And now, with a lot of, I would say, young entrepreneurs, and initiatives which have come up from women, and there are about 10 to 15% who have become unicorns. I'm sure they understand the entire nuances of finance, whether it is, like raising a loan, using it, knowing where to invest, understanding the cash flows, making a budget, and so many more. So I would say things have changed, and probably for the better.
Thank you so much. We have two very successful women in the area of finance, on the stage today, and I have worked with very successful women in this. Since I am associated with financial services, I have also worked with very successful women there. But still, there is a perception, when it comes to numbers, when it comes to finance, it's not a natural choice when it comes to young girls to go into that field. The same colleague of mine also mentioned, and mind you, she's very well educated, one of the strong personalities, can have her say, and I think one of the finest professionals I have met, in my life. But she said, when it comes to Rajiv managing my investments, when it comes to managing my, funds, I leave that to, Tarun, my husband. So I asked her why. She said it's just that he's a chartered accountant, and that gives me comfort. So is that changing in your view?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it should change. Being from the finance, I think I'm proud of the fact that I never let my husband manage my finances. So much so that when I superannuated, got a good sum from Delhi University, he kept on asking, I said, no, please stay away. I'll exactly do the way I want to. Not that there is, you're ultimately doing it for the family only. But I have an elder sister who's a doctor, a very well-practicing doctor, and her husband is a chartered accountant. And I don't understand why she lets him manage her funds. So I'm all the time at loggerheads with her. Why are you letting him do that? But before I close, on another note, I have a son and a daughter. And I ensured, at least for my daughter, that she does finance. I said, you need to manage your finances. And when she got married, that was the only advice, apart from telling her to be nice to her in-laws and all that, you need to manage your finances. And fortunately, her daughter-in-law also, she's also a finance specialist, and she also manages her finance. So I think it is changing, but it will take a little more time.
That is so true. I think I remember having made an investment, in a company. So I told you that my daughter manages my finances and net banking for last many years, and I encouraged that. She also used to visit the branch to deposit my check as a 10 or 11-year-old, and people used to wonder who's coming into the bank. So she once asked me, "You've invested this amount and you didn't ask me." So I said, "Yes, beta, but I have invested this because it's a good startup, and I think there." No, but at least you should have told me what this company is doing. Since I manage money, I should know what is this transaction all about. You've issued a check, but you have not discussed with me. That's the kind of encouragement we see today happening. I'm sure most parents sitting here and people sitting here are doing. But as you said, long way to go. I only believe that if this gets adopted across the country and probably gets into the tier 2, tier 3 cities in a rapid way, things will start changing. Thank you so much for sharing your views. Purviji, I come back to you. I think from whatever I heard, the challenges you faced both during your corporate career and you stood by what you always wanted to stand by, and you didn't ask for any favors, and you're very clear that I don't want any favors. I want to be what I am through my merit, not because I am women. And you had also the guts, at that stage when many people were not even going for employment, to start a venture and be successful. Since you are a pioneer in the field of both telecom and BFSI, because you started something in the microfinance space, what is your piece of advice to all the budding entrepreneurs and men and females both in this area? Is there anything that you would have done differently, and why?
So, once you start working and then when you decide to become an entrepreneur, it's a very difficult choice to make, because you are so used to see that one credit on last day of the month in your account that makes your life so comfortable and easy. Just imagining that next month onwards there is not going to be that credit coming to your account in itself is a nightmare. Particularly I worked for 17 long years with a corporate. So that's a very difficult decision to make, so to say. Right now the environment is very conducive. Not for the people who are sitting in this room, not just for the people who are sitting in this room, but otherwise, the kind of people that Aditi has been talking about when we started doing Jandan accounts, this entire JAM Trinity which has created, or the digital public infrastructure that has been created. Doing business has become much more easier. Your accessibility to information has become so much more easier. So people who want to be, who want to become an entrepreneur, few things that I would want to say from my own experience. We are living in a world of social media, Instagram, Reels. We don't have even patience to look at a proper video. So we now have moved to Reels where your attention span is less, in few minutes. But being an entrepreneur is not instant gratification kind of a job that you start today and you'll start seeing the results tomorrow. It's a very, very long journey. It's a difficult journey. And it's not a 100-meter race that you're running. It's a marathon. So stay focused, be confident, and just be there. You will have n number of opportunities where you will feel like giving up, because I obviously did that. I think for the first 3 years, every other day, I felt like giving up, because I thought going back to corporate and working was way more easier, because I was only responsible for my work and I was not answerable to so many people. But I tell you, and like after having spent about 13 years as an entrepreneur, I can say that it is all the hardships that you go through when you are starting, all that is worth that effort when you create something. It could be small, big, whatever, but it's the feeling of contributing something, the feeling of creating is amazing, and it is worth going through that feeling. Of course, the most important thing is you'll have to stay there. There is no instant gratification, there is no instant success that you get, but you will have to stay there. So that's an advice for all entrepreneurs, irrespective of your gender. I think the struggle almost remains similar for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much. The fact that you could start something in those days and the environment today, obviously there is a sea change in the support which we see for anybody to start. And as far as the challenge you faced in the first 3 years, when I talk to my own founders at Policy Bazaar, probably they failed 3 times before they became successful, in starting Policy Bazaar. So failure and resilience, to face those failures and to do things differently is very, very crucial when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur, I also had my own venture many years ago, which did not take off because people thought that customer resolution is not a business profit-making, so we had to move on, and I think failures are part of life for sure. Aditi, I think you did mention, first of all, kudos to Satin and your team for having done so much for women empowerment across the country. You also mentioned to me that you, apart from hiring women, apart from lending, to women, in those villages, you also educate them on health, and why insurance is important, why taking care of your, health is crucial. So, in your view, what else do you think is getting neglected? While we know that basic necessities like, toilet loans, the need for health insurance for women, the medical consultation, all these are far reach, as far as women in these towns are concerned. I remember talking to you yesterday and you mentioned that you've launched some scheme which will ensure that all these women are able to consult some of the best doctors across the country. So why don't you highlight some of the initiatives your company has taken in this regard,
Okay. So thanks for asking this question, Rajiv. And the things I will speak, most of us will wonder, is this even a topic of concern? Like I will talk about a toilet at home. And for us, we all want our individual toilets and bathrooms when we are at home. But yes, the segment where we work, even this is, I'll say, a privilege. So much so that, so we have actually built more than 3.5 lakh toilets in India. And while we are financing it and educated our clients, so we have partnered with water.org, who also gives the technical assistance or tells people how to do it. Because even when you make a toilet in rural India, there are things like stents, so how do you have to dig the pit, etc. There are so many things involved with it. Now, when you talk to those clients, so one of them actually told us that, and she was from Bihar. She said, my children, they live in Patna and they don't visit us because there's no toilet. And my grandkids and my bahu, my daughter-in-law, is ashamed. Now, since I have a toilet, they have for the first time visited and stayed with us for many days. So this also happened with me once. I was in the field in hinterlands of Rajasthan, and I told a child, bathroom kahan hai? She took me to an elderly lady who said, okay, come with me. She took me to the backyard of a house. I said, no, I need a toilet. Kehti, okay, you find it too public, I'll take you to another house. Again, it was open. And I found out there was no, and then she said, why is such a big issue? Why aren't you? I said, I can't relieve myself. And she felt embarrassed. Then she found the house of the most influential guy in the village and took me there, and I used the toilet. And then she said, when will you visit us again? We really loved when you came to us. I said, when you promise you will have a toilet. And then she promised, and after, I think 1 year, at least there were 10 toilets in that village, and then they said, now you have to visit us again, and now we will not show you ek ghar ka aangan, dusre ghar ka aangan, and so many backyards. And according to a UN study, an IS friend of mine, I was just discussing about what we do. He said UN conducted a study just because of ODF, the Open Defecation Free initiative, the birth of a newborn child has increased. So you do not realize the implications it has far and wide. It's for the coming, because these women are also going to be mothers in future. So it is health, it is dignity, it is privacy, and it is a sense of security also. Then coming to health. Health, again, as it happens, I think us women are also to be blamed for that. We don't prioritize ourselves enough. If we are not prioritizing, consider a woman who's like a daily wager, how would she prioritize her health? So first we gave a hospicash scheme where if anybody is hospitalized, at least their daily wages are secure so that she can actually consider getting a treatment or getting admitted in a hospital, because they do not want to do that. I will lose on my daily wages. So that is one scheme we did, and around 4.5 lakh women did benefit, and the benefits were also in the accidents, which they hugely benefited. Now these are very small ticket insurance premiums. Only someone like us who has a presence on ground and connect with the end customer can provide that. And the big insurance companies only bank upon us. So that actually feels great. Coming to the video consultation which you did. Again, what we felt was getting admitted is okay, but that is the extreme, that things are so worse now that you have to just get admitted. About a basic, I'll say, doctor consultation, there aren't good doctors in a village. If they are there in a nearest town or suburban area, I will not comment how qualified. But even for that, she will have to take a bus, go to that place, travel 2-3 hours, stand in a queue, consult, take medicine, come back in the evening. Is it possible? No. So she will defer it. So what we did was we partnered with a Swedish company, it's called Doc Online. And what we provided them, a nominal amount of 250 rupees a year. She can then consult innumerable number of times, and all specialities, pediatric, gynae, you talk about it, medicine. All of them will be available just on call. A video consultation will be given, and a prescription will be given, and medicines which are actually available. So again, it is more than 5.5 lakh women who have benefited. And when I say 5.5 lakh women, I will say at least 30 lakh people have benefited. Otherwise, they would have gone to a quack or ignored their health. So yes, these are, and again, coming to financial literacy. Now, my esteemed co-panelist said women don't manage their finances. You go and talk to these rural women, they will ask, when will I get a next loan, a higher ticket size loan? And when we tell them, no, you can't manage, and she's ready with her numbers. She does not know Excel sheet, she does not know IRR, XIRR, return on equity or return on assets. She said, I will buy this buffalo, I'll sell milk amounting to this, I will save this much, this I will use to repay. Now I can afford this much EMI, you give me a loan. So they are literate. You just have to tell them. So we conduct a lot of financial literacy workshops where we tell them where to invest. Don't rely on the chit fund schemes. I'm talking about shady ones. Don't rely on a Mahajan. Don't give it to your relatives on interest. Put it in FDs, put it in SIPs. And they're actually a lot more receptive than an urban woman. Because they understand if they give it to their husband who might gamble it off or drink it away, she should actually save it for the children and for herself and for any exigencies. So yes, these are some of the things I would just touch upon.
Great. I think I'll come back to Purviji again. You also run a microfinance institution, and you've obviously one of the faces which people should see if they have to look at successful women entrepreneurs. And I think you're one of the fair representatives of such successful women in the country today. As a microfinance institution, what is your contribution on this side, particularly when it comes to health of women, and I'm sure you're also facing a lot of women in your company. And are there any areas where you have worked specially which people should know,
So when it comes to rural India, the challenges are pretty much same, only the magnitude is very different. Areas that, of course, apart from the UP and, we started from Gujarat and we are very extensively working in Bihar. So when I had never traveled to Bihar before we actually started working in Bihar, and the kind of impression that was created was very, very different, and what you actually see on the ground is very different, but the level of intervention required in such geographies is way more higher than what you need in places like Gujarat or Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra, because one, the level of literacy is extremely low. Availability of resources is very, very scarce in those geographies. What Aditi mentioned about the availability of health, availability of, proper drinking water, availability of toilet. That is like a far-flung dream to have your own toilet in most of the villages. And education. Education also remains still difficult, but the good part of the story is that things are changing. A lot of intervention is happening. Now the women that we work with, most of them are illiterate, so about 60% of our customers cannot even sign, they still use thumb impression. But when you speak to them, they are very enthusiastic and they are very aware of the importance of education. So they want their daughters to study. Of course, availability is only till about 7th grade or something in the nearby villages, but they are also okay sending their girls to, the nearby cities for education. So there is a awareness, there is a lot that is happening in most of these geographies, and we I don't want to repeat what Aditi just mentioned, we also work on health, education, hygiene, making them very basic health services available. Besides the financial empowerment, the whole idea of microfinance is that when you empower a woman, you empower a family. And when a woman starts contributing economically in the house, her importance in the house, she starts getting acknowledged for her contribution. The violence, the domestic violence also goes down when she starts contributing. And when she brings that extra money on the table, that goes towards health and education in the family. So at least the next generation is slightly more next generation has better availability of those basics. So that's the whole essence of microfinance, and that's what, and as an industry, while we are talking about our own institutions, I think as an industry, the microfinance industry, all the players put together, whether it is banks, SFBs, NBFCs, MFIs put together, have reached out to more than 7 crore women borrowers across all these geographies. And they are, not just in some developed states, but in some of the very, very difficult to reach kind of terrain. So, about 10 years back, the portfolio of microfinance was not even 10,000 crore when 2010 crisis happened. But now the portfolio is likely to be at about 4.25 lakh crores. And that means, you know, the financial inclusion is working, and a lot of, as I already said, a lot of enabling actions are also being seen, like, you know, the availability of bank accounts, availability to make payment, availability to a lot of fintech, insurtech, agri-tech companies also are playing a very important role in taking this financial inclusion agenda forward. But a long way to go, because still women's contribution in the GDP is just 18%, and this is a very recent report that I was referring. So 50% of the population is only contributing 80% to the GDP. So if we have to talk about the theme of this event, which is vibrant and Viksit, how can we be Viksit if that 50% is not you know, realizing their full potential?
So true.
And that means if we are able to bridge that gap, that means our GDP without doing anything will grow by about 18%. That's the kind of potential that we can unleash by just becoming more inclusive. It is not just a social agenda to do, but I think it has a lot more impact on the economy of the country as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Purvi. I just want to check if Dr. Rajesh is here as to how much time we have, because I can then decide whether we continue our discussion or we ask some questions from the panel. 5 minutes? So I think while I have so many questions to ask, I'm sure we could have better utilized the time of all of you present here. But for the benefit of audience who've been listening to us patiently, if all of you agree, we can take 1 or 2 questions, you know, from the audience. So if there are any questions, we can take 1 or 2 questions. Yes, sir. You can give this.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name is R.K. Das, Director USTP. It's a non-profit company.
Let us speak. Is the mic on?
Yeah, it's on. It's on. So this is about, I think our main focus has been on urban women. But it is true that urban women are guiding the rest of the women of the country. But there are certain communities, other than the major communities, majority, I am talking about communities other than the majority communities, there are certain social norms, religious practices, which keeps them utterly restricted to their home in their social and marriage life. So why we are not talking about them? Whether uniform civil code come very fast, and how do we address those areas? This is the area of urban women and all that. It's okay. We are going through that. The government is also formulating policies. But what about that also?
Thank you. I think, Madam, if you can take this question. Because
Absolutely. Something very close to my heart. Sir, if you recall what I had said earlier, there are literally 2 Indias which are operating as far as our approach to women is concerned. And the other India is very scary because there are developments which are happening, which are going to fast outpace whatever efforts we are putting in. And for me, the foremost amongst that is climate change. Climate change is going to change cropping patterns. Bulk of rural India comprises of women who are in the fields. Therefore, you find that the impact of climate change, cropping patterns, what kind of weather changes we are seeing on a daily basis, what kind of an impact does it have on the other women, which you are talking about. So yes, your point is valid, that whatever we are speaking sitting here, we are speaking from a standpoint of what we are imposing from urban India or for so-called developed India onto the other part of India. So yes, we do need to address those concerns.
thank you. Do we have time for 1 more question? Yeah. Yes, the gentleman there.
I am happy to see more women on the dais than men. Honor to the ladies. One question which I wanted to ask to the lady panelists is that they have touched on many subjects, but one thing which was missing is that in our country, women should be allowed to wear what they are comfortable with. And they should have no any fear or anything like that. That nobody has touched it.
So we did talk about what is empowerment to me. Empowerment to me is if I'm allowed to do what I want to do. You know, flower the way I would like to do. So I think you're very right when you suggest that. And that is the thought which will take us where we want to be. The other perspective here is that some amount of nurturing, some amount of telling them where the right path is, becomes the duty of the parents, relatives, elders in the house. But yes, when I'm in a position to think a little more independently, which will come a little later, then yes, I should be allowed to chart a path for myself. So, very rightly said, and I think that is what true empowerment would also mean. Yeah.
Anybody wants to add something? Take it, great. Rajeshji, do we have time or we? Huh? Please. Okay. We have time. Yeah. Ma'am, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mamta, Head of Public Affairs and Communications for a German company called Infineon Technologies. I have 2 points to make. We talk a lot about women empowerment. We talk about vibrant, Viksit India. In a German company, Infineon, which is a R&D company, what I have been noticing is that at the entry level, we have 50% women, and by the time we reach 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the journey, it goes down to 25%. We have been raking our heads on how to fill in this gender gap, but somehow it happens that girls come from engineering colleges. They are excellent workers and they leave for various reasons, obviously wedding being one of them, motherhood being one of them. We have come up with many with schemes for them where they can join after some time, but somehow they are not able to do it. That is one thing. Second, on the personal level, we talk about having an equal opportunity. So let me bring in 2 instances. In 2011, when my daughter wanted to go to US for her higher education, and I took her to a professional educator, the first question was, "Sir, ma'am, do you want to spend that kind of money in your daughter's education?" Very surprising. She got into New York University, she went on to Stern School of Business, everything fine. Second was with me, same time, I was traveling to Munich. The gentleman at the immigration asked me, "Aap akele ja rahe ho?" Fine, yes, I'm going alone. And one happened 4 months back. Again at the immigration, the person looked at my passport, my husband's passport. He looked at me and he said, "Aapka to business visa hai. Sir, aap saath mein ja rahe ho?" My husband laughingly said, "Haan, madam, mujhe saath mein le ja rahi hain." He said, "Business visa kabhi dekhte hain, you know, like." So this is the real truth today also for women, you know.
Thank you so much. I think, thank you for at least sharing, you know, what you shared with all of us. I would just like to quickly summarize because we are expecting the minister anytime now. There are loads of opportunities. Trust me, I have seen the birth of unicorns in the last, a decade. And today, there is space in the next decade for another 1,000 unicorns. So if there are budding entrepreneurs sitting in this room, be it young students, be it people working in the corporate world, if you have an idea, if you believe that you can do something in a space which you are expert at, this is the time to get in, and take that chance, take that risk, and make that dream of creating employment happen for this country. I think if all of us look for employment and don't create employment, I think the objective of making this, 30 trillion economy, by 2047 is going to be a distant dream. There are incubation centers. The government is most supportive today. The number of initiatives the government has taken. There are incubation centers across the country, So don't just discuss your idea at home. Come out and open, discuss, take support, and trust me, we need a lot of successful entrepreneurs and particularly a lot of women entrepreneurs as well. We have many examples. We can discuss for another 1 hour. I think this topic is so interesting. I would like to thank all, my fellow panelists present here for sharing their valuable experience and, and educating all of us in terms of what you have done in your respective fields, Thank you so much, for taking out time and discussing and sharing. And all of us are available, I don't know how, what methodology ASSOCHAM can create. I'm sure there are a lot of questions in your minds. In case you have any questions, you can address those questions, and I will take responsibility to talk to my fellow panelists to come back to you with specific answers if you have any, So I would request ASSOCHAM to see what we can do in case we have the list of participants who want to ask questions later. Thank you so much, all of you, and it was really, really insightful. And I'm going back as a better learned person, so that my ability to deal with, women is much better, both at home and, and the corporate world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We would like to thank all our speakers on stage, Mr. Rajiv Gupta, Ms. Dakshita Das, Dr. Amrita Suneja, Ms. Purvi J. Bhavsar, Professor Madhu Vich, Ms. Aditi Singh, and Mr. Vishal Kedia. Thank you all for sparing the time to come here and sharing your experiences, anecdotes, and your advice to all the audience here on how women can be made to feel equal and how we can create an inclusive environment for women in our country so that the vision of Viksit Bharat comes true. We shall be starting with our next session, which is on safeguarding women and children from the impact of climate change very shortly. I request all of you to please remain seated. The Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, will be with us very soon. So I request all of you to please be on your seats and we shall start with the program very soon. This is something which is going to be a very important topic in the time to come. When we talk of climate change, is there a disproportionate impact on women and children? And this study will perhaps try to give some answers on what could be the strategy to mitigate the impact of climate change. Request all of you to please remain seated. We will start shortly. I request all of you to please remain seated and please clear the aisles. The Honorable Minister, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, will be here any time now. I request all of you to remain seated. We have bottles of water on your tables itself. There is no snacks or refreshments outside, so please remain seated. We will start with the program in no time. I request all of you to settle down. Today on International Women's Day, we have a full house and the attendance is remarkable. I'm sure what we're going to hear during the course of the rest of the day will also be remarkable. It's just a matter of a few minutes. Request all of you to please settle down and take your seats. I think if you have seats at the back of the hall, please take them, but please don't stand in the aisles because that's not going to serve you or anybody else. Please take your seats and settle down. बेस्ट है आप लोग जल्दी जल्दी बैठ जाइए पूरा पैक्ड हाउस है अपनी जगह पहले से ही बना ले तो अच्छा है you'll be comfortable for the rest of the program. So request everybody to please take your seats and please find empty seats at the back of the hall if you cannot find them in the on the round tables. There are a few seats at the back of the hall. Please take them. We'll be starting with the program very shortly. I would also like to remind everyone, if you could please put your phones on silent, and we would like to avoid any interruptions, any ringtones when the speakers are speaking. So request all of you to please put your phone on silent or in airplane mode, and please settle down and take your seats. Request all of you to please settle down and take your seats. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen, and put your hands together to welcome the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Government of India. Please welcome Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani with a huge round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not hearing it. तालियों की गड़गड़ाहट से स्मृति मैम का स्वागत करिए. For an auspicious start to the event, I would request our esteemed dignitaries to please light the ceremonial lamp. The Honorable Minister, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, Mr. Ajay Singh, President ASSOCHAM, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Dr. Amarjeet Sinha, Dr. Sunita Narayan, Mr. Ravi Bhatnagar. Request all of you to please come forward to light the lamp. Dr. Mahavir Golecha, Dr. Akash Srivastav, Ms. Archana Jahagirdar. Request all of you to please come forward to light the lamp. And Mr. Deepak Sood. Thank you for initiating this auspicious beginning to the conference. I request all our dignitaries to please take their seats on the dais. I would request Mr. Ajay Singh, President ASSOCHAM and Chairman and Managing Director SpiceJet, to please welcome our chief guest, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Government of India, with a bouquet. We are very grateful to ma'am for gracing us with her presence. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking the time out and coming here. I would request Mr. Ajay Singh to please present a bouquet to Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chairperson MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, to welcome her to the conference. Thank you. Climate change is one of the greatest global challenges of the 21st century. It is believed that people who are already most vulnerable and marginalized, like women and children, will also experience its greatest impact. In spite of their vulnerability, women are not only seen as victims of climate change, but they can also be seen as active and effective agents and promoters of adaptation and mitigation. I would now request Mr. Ajay Singh, President ASSOCHAM, and Chairman and Managing Director SpiceJet, to please come to the podium and address the audience and give the welcome address. Please put your hands together for Mr. Ajay Singh.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you. And we are absolutely delighted that we should be joined today by one of the most eminent and dynamic ministers of the Government of India, the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Ms. Smriti Irani, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Dr. Amarjeet Sinha, Dr. Sunita Narayan, so many old friends on this podium. It's wonderful to see all of you today. Mr. Ravi Bhatnagar, Dr. Mahavir Golecha, Dr. Akash Srivastav, Ms. Archana Jahagirdar, and of course, Mr. Deepak Sood. So very warm welcome. And this is an incredibly, incredibly important subject that all of us are discussing today. It's a subject that needs much more attention than it is actually getting. The impact of climate change, as we all know, climate change is not gender neutral. it does impact women more than it impacts men. In our society, of course, women have a disproportionate responsibility for livelihood, disproportionate responsibility to gather food for their families, and a disproportionate responsibility to stay healthy so that they can provide for their children and their families. And there is no doubt that climate change is significantly impacting all this. Statistics show that when human beings are displaced due to climate change, 80% of those people displaced are actually women. And this is something that we all need to pay attention to. How do we ensure that there are more women in the workplace? How do we ensure that they stay healthy? How do we ensure that climate change actually makes less of an impact on them and on their children? And in a land where we worship Durga and Lakshmi and Saraswati, it's only fitting that we must all work together to ensure that our policies that are geared towards alleviating climate change prioritize women and children in that process. So I'm delighted that all of you are here to discuss something incredibly important, and I do hope that we'll get some pointers as the private sector on what we can do as private sector companies to make our own contribution, because there is no doubt that India is not going to be a developed nation by 2047 unless we address squarely issues of the sort that are being debated today. So very warm welcome once again to all of you, and I do hope that these deliberations will lead to some specific conclusions and some specific advice for all of us and a path forward, and ensure that we can play our role in contributing to making India a developed nation by 2047. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chairperson, MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, to please address the audience and talk to us about this special report which analyzes the impact of climate change on women and children. Please put your hands together for Dr. Swaminathan.
Namaskar and good morning. Honorable Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Mrs. Smriti Zubin Irani ji. First of all, thank you so much, Madam, for having agreed to come and not just listen to the recommendations of this report, which is being released, with a really good gathering of business leaders, as well as government and UN leaders here in the room. But I must tell you that this whole idea came from the minister herself. And a few months ago, she flagged to me this importance of this topic and the fact that no one was talking about the impact of climate change specifically on women and children. And obviously, it's an issue close to her heart. And so she asked us, along with Karmanya and the BMGF, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who supported this study, to go ahead and do this. So we've put this together in a very, very short time frame. And I'm sure that with your inputs and further suggestions, we'll be able to really expand on this for our the final report. But we must start with the statement by the Prime Minister, who specifically, of course, this was in terms of an international forum where he said it's necessary to protect everyone's interests. But obviously, the everyone includes women as well. And again, very quickly to say that climate change is impacting all of us. It's impacting us in ways that we can see, as well as in ways that we cannot see. Those of us who are in this room are probably the more fortunate of us. We have the means to protect ourselves from some of the impacts of climate change. There are many others out there, men and women and children, who don't have the same capacity to be able to adapt, to be resilient, and to carry on with life. And so whether this is just the health impacts, and we'll come to some of the other impacts, but whether it's heat-related illness, whether it's trauma, anxiety, post-traumatic stress because of being displaced from your home, whether it's more respiratory diseases because of air pollution, whether it's mosquito-borne diseases like dengue, chikungunya, malaria, malnutrition because of the unavailability of nutritious food, and of course migration. All of this comes from the very basic threats to biodiversity, to the environment, more pollution, loss of soil, water shortage, and of course global temperature rise. So we've, for the purpose of this study, and again this is something the minister herself had asked us to look at agroecological zones, because as you know, India, we work on the basis of states and districts and cities, but agroecological zones are an important aspect because of the weather patterns and the way that they are likely to change. And therefore, this, of course, crosses state boundaries because nature doesn't follow administrative boundaries. So on this slide, what you can see really is on the left, it's a map that's showing you the exposure in India to extreme hydromet disasters, that is floods, cyclones, and droughts. And you can see that 75% of Indian districts and about 80% of the population are exposed to one or more of these events, and many districts have floods and droughts alternately. Then in the middle, you see the heat waves, and of course, a large part of India is likely to experience higher heat, but the areas which are in very dark red and brown are in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Rajasthan, etc., are likely to have very, very high heat exposure. And then on the right side, you see a graph which looks at air pollution. And these are the areas of India where the annual prevalence of PM 2.5 exceeds the national ambient air quality standards of 40 micrograms per cubic millimeter, which by itself is much higher than the WHO standard of 5 micrograms. So even the 40 microgram limit is being crossed in a large part of India and in most of our cities. So why are they disproportionately impacted? It's partly because of their roles and responsibilities, cultural norms. Of course, poverty always adds, to the mix of risk. The UNDP says that women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die in a disaster, but they're also impacted by crop failure. This leads to food insecurity and more work on the field, water scarcity, conflicts and migration, healthcare, because women are spending more time on the field or at work. They have less time to take care of their own health. They also, of course, have caregiving responsibilities, both for children and the elderly. Fuel, natural disasters, displacement, all of this impacts women, but also children. They are one of the most vulnerable, both to death and disability, but also to chronic effects, like heat, for example. We still don't understand how heat exposure is impacting children's learning. If they're sitting in a hot and humid classroom, can they really concentrate on their studies? We've seen that children, because they are smaller, they have smaller airways and lungs, they breathe more rapidly, they are more affected by air pollution than adults. And on the flip side, we need everyone for climate action, right? Climate action, if we are to adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change, it can't be done unless women and children are involved and empowered. And in fact, there are studies which show that if you give women the same resources as men, they actually do much more with that. Even agricultural yield improves. Women also have, of course, agricultural women have a lot of natural knowledge, traditional knowledge and wisdom about what works and what doesn't. So if you empower them with the tools and the resources, they put it to use. Women have always been at the forefront of environmental conservation, and more you see children now, right? Children are speaking up. They want action. They are demanding action because they know that it's their future, that they are going to live in a world where, most of us will not be around. So this scoping study, I'll just have time only to take you through the major recommendations. We did basically a literature review. We also did some analytics. We tried to identify the gaps in the literature, and we had a lot of discussions and regional workshops to gather inputs from experts, from civil society organizations, from NGOs, and from the community themselves. from different agroecological zones of the country. Now, climatic events, of course, are sudden, like cyclones and tsunamis and flash floods, but a lot of it is now gradual or recurrent, like heat waves and droughts and things like that. So the impacts are also can be sudden, and they can also be chronic or subacute. Now, just looking at a few indicators, what we did is only map hotspots. We are not even saying that there's a direct correlation between these. For example, if you see underweight women, you'll see that there's, a stretch across central India where there is underweight women, and in the same districts, you have a lot of the hydrometeorological disasters. Similarly, girl-child marriage. You can see map districts where there's high girl-child marriage and also a lot of disasters. I already talked about heat waves. There is increased mortality due to heat. Again, the data is not out there. The data is very hard to get and to really correlate some of these things, so we need to do more work on that. When pregnant women are exposed to high heat and air pollution, they have higher chance of premature babies being born and also higher chance of their own health, like high blood pressure and so on. We also know that air pollution contributes to the increased diabetes rates that we are seeing. Again, when people are exposed to drought, over the last 50 years, we looked at districts in India that have been exposed to drought repeatedly, and you find that even things like domestic violence, girl-child marriage, all of this increase in districts where there's more, they've had more drought. Women's livelihoods are impacted in many different ways, whether it's agriculture, whether it's migrant. Now, the migrants could be men. Women get left behind in their villages, which means they have to do more work. They have to tend to the fields, and they have to look after the household, the children, etc. Non-timber-based, produce-based livelihoods because of loss of forest, loss of biodiversity. This is also impacting many of the livelihoods, traditional livelihoods that women, especially in our tribal areas, had. And the warming of the ocean, we often forget about the coastal communities. And India has such a long coastline, and there are people involved in fishing, but also non-fishing livelihoods, and they're all getting impacted by salinization, by the rise of sea level, by the loss of, reducing fish yields that the small fishermen are able to get. And of course, they're also being impacted by heat and humidity. Now again, children, we know that many of the gains we've made in child survival could be undermined now because of the impacts of climate. And again, these graphs just show examples of stunting and underweight in children in the same areas as areas which have extreme floods, droughts, and so on. We know again that heat waves, air pollution, floods are all impacting, especially newborns and infants in the first year after birth. And the same relationship we see in children who've living in drought-prone areas are more likely to be stunted and have less minimum, the dietary diversity. So what they eat on their plate is also less. Again, climate hazards, children's education. We know that when you're disrupted, you have to be moved out of your home. Learning will be disrupted. And not only it's just the learning, but it's also children's cognitive and socio-emotional development. I was talking to a psychiatrist colleague in Chennai who said this whole thing about eco-anxiety, that she's actually seeing children in her psychiatric practice who are so worried all the time that their homes will be affected, that they won't be able to go to school, that they're constantly anxious and having nightmares about climate. It's also because of all the gloom and doom stories that they see on media. So coming to some of the recommendations and interims. India does have a national action plan and state action plans for climate change, but they do not operationalize the gender elements adequately or evenly, even though the national action plan does say that this plan needs to be gender sensitive. This is the time to review those state action plans on climate change and make them not just gender sensitive, but gender transformational. Hopefully with the minister's guidance and blessings, this can happen. We need a budgetary allocation. Without finances flowing into these things, these policies just sit on paper and cannot be operationalized. We need monitoring, we need evaluation, and we need more research, longitudinal studies to see what's the impact. And if you put in an intervention, if you do something, what is how does it positively or negatively impact women. We talked about pregnant women, and so heat action needs to be prioritized. What are local urban bodies doing about heat? What are companies doing to protect their employees from heat? Can Ashas and Anganwadi workers deliver tailored messages for pregnant women? We also need to see what is a heat wave. There's just one definition of a heat wave today for the whole of India. But I live in Chennai. 40 degrees in Chennai and 40 degrees in Delhi are very different the way they impact the body, because you have to add the humidity factor. And therefore, the heat wave definitions need to be looked at. We can look at the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana scheme, which is the Ayushman Bharat, to make sure that the benefit packages and the delivery of those schemes at the health and wellness centers, at the primary health centers, are including climate-sensitive diseases. There is a direct correlation between natural disasters and increased gender-based violence. So there needs to be something done about that. Gender clinics, hotlines, helplines for women, particularly in those areas impacted by extreme weather events. Emergency shelters, there are studies showing that women's needs for toilets and for menstrual health, these are often not even thought about when emergency shelters are set up. So all of these need a gender lens and make sure that their needs are met. Biomass for cooking, unfortunately, still many women are using biomass because they cannot afford to use only LPG, even though they mostly have access to LPG, they can't afford the refills. And so we have to think of how can we make at least clean energy for cooking. You know, that should be done in the next few years. And then women as first responders. We know that the majority of healthcare providers, Anganwadi workers, nurses, community health, they're all women. They themselves have needs. They themselves get affected by climate. And therefore, we have to also support our women workers in the field. We'll talk more in the panel on livelihoods and what can be done, but we need multi-sectoral and convergent action. Panchayats have to be empowered. They need to be given the funds. Local urban bodies need to have a plan and funding. And of course, SHGs, self-help groups can do a lot. And finally, I'll come to the point again on gender-based budgeting. How do we do that in an effective manner? Can we have a gender focal point in each ministry? We need more research to understand the gendered impacts of climate. And of course, we can't forget that there are other vulnerable groups, the elderly, the disabled. So women and children, yes, but there are also these other groups that. So I'd like to thank very much the minister again for having asked us to do this. We've learned so much, but I also want to thank the team, and if you don't mind standing up, because I don't have a slide with your names, Arundita, Anjali, Amit, and the Karmanya team, could you please, yeah. Sandeep, Shubhangi, thank you all so much for making this happen, and certainly we'll continue to work after we receive your inputs and feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now request our dignitaries on stage, the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, to please release this report. I request Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Mr. Ajay Singh, and our other dignitaries on stage to please release this report. This study is a compilation by Swaminathan Foundation in collaboration with Karmanya and ASSOCHAM and supported by BMGF and the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Thank you all for releasing this report. I would now request Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Government of India, to please address the audience. The time has come for that moment that we all have been waiting for. So please give a huge round of applause to Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani. Ma'am, I request you to please address the audience.
I think we should start the panel. Today is not the day for political speeches on this forum.
Just a few words from you, because everybody is waiting to hear you.
With the audience's permission, I think impact of the effort is such that it deserves more time in terms of the conversation across such an esteemed panel. If you would agree, I would hand it over to Dr. Swaminathan to begin the conversation. I will only say this, the intention with which I had proposed this to Dr. Swaminathan and to Karmanya was that we wanted to ensure more and more indigenous research capacities are strengthened. On issues of climate or issues of gender, most of the research base or outlook emanates from the West. And we are to be held to a standard by people who possibly do not understand our legacies, our diversity, our capacity to respond in multiple layers, given the enormity of our linguistic and cultural heritage, and how we have managed to find a balance between our civilizational legacy and our steadfast approach to certain modern challenges and capacity to be frugal in our innovation, but also find solutions with alacrity. And one of the reasons why there has always been this gap between an international understanding of what they call climate impact and what we have lived as a legacy with regards to our climate interface, for that matter, how we celebrate our biodiversity or how we apply ourselves to climate challenges that emanate in our societies, is something that I was hoping that Dr. Swaminathan and the team at Karmanya can help bridge and give an Indian context to not only climate change, but also the gender quotient in it. We know that internationally, this is also not an area where there is much work that has been done. And hence, I'm very proud of this particular initiative, because we will now set global standards as to how climate change can be looked at from the lens of gender and also from the prism of childcare and the support children need with regards to impact that will emanate from climate change. So Dr. Swaminathan, I'm extremely grateful that you accepted my proposal, and I'm hopeful that today's conversation will give rise to many such opportunities to study this issue deeper and to find solutions in proposals that are already right now implemented by the government. So if there are small adjustments that need to take place, small contribution that we can give in terms of policy ideas, I can assure you that I will become that bridge of conversation between the government and academicians and research analysts like you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your vision and your guidance, of course. And I think that a lot can be done using, as you said, our traditional wisdom and the cultural moorings that we have, but also blending in the modern tools and technologies, where, again, India is a leader, as far as a digital backbone is concerned. So we have some very eminent panelists today. All of them come with a lot of experience in their respective fields. So I'd like to invite each of them perhaps to make some comments on this subject based on what we've just heard, but also based on what the minister requested in terms of what could be those future policy or strategy interventions, as well as what are the research needs and gaps that Indians and Indian academics and research institutions need to focus on. So I'll maybe go first to Dr. Amarjeet Sinha, who's of course a very senior ex-IAS officer, has held a lot of different positions in government, including in the PMO, and has very extensive experience in rural development. That's his passion as well, and he's just written a book. So Amarjeet, perhaps from your experience, can you share your thoughts on you can speak from here, it's fine.
Respected Minister, respected fellow panelists, the subject is one where one can go on and on, because I was very fortunate to spend a lot of my time in sectors which get affected due to climate change: health, education, rural livelihoods in particular. And clearly, as far as the policies of government are concerned, in many ways, the response has been immediate. In some others, the response has been after a lot of deliberation, and yet other emerging challenges which we keep facing. Yes, till some decades ago or some years ago, a lot of people thought that the melting glacier will do no harm to them, because the communication of climate change was that melting glacier. But that melting glacier has come nearer home, disrupting agriculture year after year. When you have precipitation in a few hours, what that geography used to receive over a few months, you can imagine the level of disruption. All of us have lived with COVID and know what disruptions are and who suffers most when such disruptions happen. As has come out so clearly in the United Nations Development Programme's report, that yes, COVID disrupted lives. As a consequence, if you were to work out the human development index across countries, life expectancy shrank, years in schooling came down, and gross national income per capita also got affected. So the disruption that public health emergencies can cause, we have already seen, and in many ways, I draw the parallel with climate events, that is the potential it has. But many coping strategies, and Honorable Prime Minister has been globally and nationally raising the issue of living, of partnership, of community action to be able to take care of this. I'll just narrate a few examples which bring out the point of coping. Just as this rainfall and precipitation patterns changing, rain-fed agriculture gets most affected. Many parts of the country which don't have assured irrigation, especially in the central Indian tribal area, the rainfall, precipitation events and changes therein affects agriculture. So Honorable Prime Minister's first direction to us in 2014-15 in rural development was let 60% expenditures be on agriculture. Now agriculture, as we know, much as the agriculture census of 2011-12 told us that only 11.2% of those who work in agriculture are women. Land ownership may be 11.2%, but actual work in agriculture, more than half, 60-70% of the work is actually being done by women. Now if that is the case, by ensuring that 60% of whatever we spent on the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Guarantee Scheme should go to agriculture and allied activities, and to take up individual beneficiary schemes like farm ponds and wells on a larger scale. Climate events and sustainability of agriculture in rain-fed events, it makes it very necessary that your protective irrigation capacity should go up. And as a consequence of this, over the last 10 years, almost about 3.6 million farm ponds, which add that little sustainability in times of climate change and difficulties. Even if the rainfall doesn't happen on time, you can still cope. There are examples of this kind. Now, if you look at the precipitation pattern and districts in India, yes, every year, there are 15 to 20% districts where the rainfall is not normal or the timing is not normal. So one way of coping again is for all your workfare programs, a system where you provide for more work in those years. But having said that, the challenges to livelihood disrupts all walks of life. The preparedness of health centers, we now have the health and wellness centers. The mandate given to them is to provide for that coverage of services which takes care of impending needs and emerging challenges. As has been pointed out in the report as well, that's where we need to focus on. Education, the learning poverty as a consequence of the COVID is a global phenomena. We will have to address it. Now clearly some of these challenges as a consequence of climate change have thrown new challenges. While we were very happy when the UNDP pointed out to us that 415 million persons came out of multidimensional poverty between 2005-06 and 1921, But we also have to bear in mind how disruptions can affect incomes. And from that point of view, this is very timely. The issues that have been flagged in the report today for the sectors that I just mentioned about, and clearly a community-led action which the Honorable Prime Minister has been saying from all global platforms, the LIFE program as he calls it, unless and until the coping through community action with decentralized, untied financial resources to provide for what is an emerging challenge, that's where the answer lies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amarjeet, for those really important points. I'll turn next to Dr. Sunita Narayan, who's the Director General of the Center for Science and Environment, and of course has been tracking climate change for a very long time. What would be your intervention? I know we don't have a lot of time, so very briefly, what would be some key areas where you think we can have action?
Thank you, Soumya ji, and thank you, Minister. I think you've set the stage. In my view, the climate change issue is really about finding solutions. And you very rightly have pointed out that we need solutions to come from our part of the world. And I think that's really what the search has to be. The report has done an incredible job in laying out for us the challenge, the crisis, the urgency. And the fact that this is disproportionate impact, the fact that it affects the health and takes away, in my view, the biggest challenges, takes away the development dividend. The huge effort governments are making to lift people out of poverty, every disaster takes that away. But the point today is how do we move ahead? And that, I think, is where the minister's leadership and her words were so important. What do we do? What is it that we, in our part of the world, can show that this is the way that we can walk lightly on earth? And if you look at it, every one of the challenges that were laid out, there are answers which we are experimenting, working with in our country. What we need to do is to amplify that. Let's take the issue of water. Amarjeet ji very correctly said that climate change is really going to bring that scenario in where we are going to have more rain in fewer number of rainy days. Now just consider the fact that we in India only get rain for 100 hours in a year. Only for 100 hours in a year. Now what you're being told is that the number of hours will reduce and the amount of rain will increase. This is the scenario of floods and drought. Now the answer to this really is what India has practiced in the past. The whole issue of traditional water harvesting structures, where every drop of rain was harvested. Rain is decentralized, so is the supply of water. That was the mantra of India. That is really what has been done by government policy. And I think with you lending your voice to this as an issue that needs to be taken forward, it's something that needs to be understood across the world. Today, Spain is having a crisis of water. The answers come from how we have grown water-prudent crops. The Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, has done so much to talk about the issue of millets. Now, why millets? Because millets are water-prudent crops. Millets are also nutritive crops. Now, those are the answers that we are bringing in. My final point, Soumya, just is on the issue of heat. Heat is clearly going to be one of the most devastating impacts of climate change. But if you look at heat, again, you look at traditional Indian architecture, we learned how to live with heat. We learned how to live with extremes. Modern architecture is based on glass, okay? The amount of glass you have, you say, oh, this is a very modern building. Glass is the most ecologically inappropriate substance that you would use in a country like India. So I think a lot of this is something that we need to now incorporate into the learning, the knowledge we've had, into the policies which are already there. I mean, Mahua, for instance, has a very good policy for affordable housing. But an affordable housing policy which incorporates both the impacts of climate change, gender, and bringing in what was the knowledge that we had in the past so that wind would become a natural ventilation point. Because remember what Soumya ji just said, it's the wet bulb phenomena which is the problem. I mean, it's not about heat, it's about ventilation. A room with air conditioning without a fan is as bad as not having a cooling system. So you have to understand the new science, which actually, Minister, like you said very clearly, comes out of old science and has to be taken forward because the whole world is today struggling to find answers. And if we can show those answers, how we tread lightly on earth, that's the way the world can learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita ji. Let me turn next to Mr. Ravi Bhatnagar. You're from the private sector. You've done work, of course, on climate resilient schools. The report has a case study on climate resilient schools in Uttarakhand. But I'd like to maybe ask you to address what can the private sector do actually to address this issue, or what are a couple of things private sector can do?
Yeah, it starts from own homes and, the employer policies, what companies have. For an example, when we put our bills for Uber and Ola versus we get the bills for the Blue Smart, the chances of getting clearance for the green bills is much more. And it's not just an India phenomena, we are in 40 plus countries. That's one thing, the company takes care of. Second is the investments on the climate in terms of your CSR fundings. So 2 years back, we started working on this Char Dham climate cohort for Uttarakhand. At that time, people came to us and said, you make various products, so how this is linked? Your factory is not there. We said, again, coming from Smriti ma'am's, talking about taking account into culture and working on the parameters which can actually help the consciousness among the kids. We just concluded the Oho Hill Yatra in Uttarakhand, which went to all the districts, all the schools participated under the leadership of the Honorable Chief Minister, but with one mission, and the mission is a mission life, which was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister. So we made sure the mission life gets translated into action, and we started 1,300 scholarships in Uttarakhand itself for the kids. And if I tell you about the proportion, it's gender balanced scholarships what we did, 50% for the boys and 50% for the girls. And the scholarships are in action. Last month we concluded this Oho Hill Yatra. We said our work doesn't stop here. We do some further work with the monies which are available, like WHO has the 7-point plan to take care of diarrhea as well as pneumonia under the GADP framework. So we said let's go to the places where the climatic changes are very high in terms of the droughts, in terms of where the rains are not coming on time. So we identified the districts, especially among the aspirational districts, and started investing there. And we're very proud the number of lives we are able to save by calculations through the Delhi coefficients. We are working on that. But on a macro level, there's more sensitization which is needed in terms of what we wear. Is my jeans upcycled? Is my corporate suit upcycled? Can I reduce the burden on ecology? Every action matters. And in Hindi, I will say, mere 10 gaj, which is my 10 yards in English. If we take care of our 10 yards, the probability of winning is very high, and corporates have to come forward to take more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, those are really good points. And I think for corporate leaders, it's what Minister was saying to me just before we started was that it's a question of economic growth and productivity. If your staff and your workers are unhealthy, or they're worried, or they're exposed to all these disasters and we're not taking care of them, then obviously the productivity is going to go down. I'd like to turn now to Dr. Mahavir Golecha, who's worked a lot on heat action plans, particularly starting in Ahmedabad, which was one of the leaders of the heat action plan, to just maybe say what can we do to protect women and young children particularly from heat.
Yeah, thank you very much, respected minister, respected fellow panelists. So, as we all know that climate change is affecting women and children disappropriately, and they are not contributing to it. And one of the thing that we have studied, the impact of climate change is extreme heat, and heat is going to increase in near future. The frequency, intensity, and duration of heat wave. It is not that heat wave is coming nowadays. It was since last 100 we are experiencing. But nowadays the intensity, frequency, and duration of heat wave has increased, and it is affecting children and women more because of their physiological changes during the pregnancy, and children because they surface to body area and their the organ poorly organ developed organ, and further because of their high metabolic rate. So children are largely affected, and in our study in this city of Ahmedabad in 2010, we have found that during heat wave, the mortality rate increased by 3 times. So, the NICU admission during in 2009 and 2011, because there was no heat wave. In 2010, there was heat wave, so NICU admission has also increased by 3 times. And then children are affected at a very lesser temperature. If temperature going by 1 degree above, then 42 degree. If it is 42 degree, if increase by 1 degree, the 40% increase in IPD admission for children in the hospitals for heat-related illnesses. So there is a clear-cut established fact that it is affecting children, not only children and pregnant women. And in pregnant women, it becomes more serious because of during pregnancy, the antidiuretic hormone the release increase, and it led to more dehydration, higher blood flow, changes in circulation, and it may lead to preterm birth, it may lead to stillbirth, it may lead to eclampsia, and also many congenital abnormalities like spinal bifida, cranioneural. So heat is affecting, there is no doubt, and we have to work. So with response to that, in 2010, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, then Chief Minister Sri Narendra Bhai Modi, we have implemented Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan. It was India's and South Asia's first heat action plan, and in 2013 we have implemented this heat action plan. This heat action plan basically involved 4 components, and it is very easy, not much scientific. The first component of heat action plan is establishing early warning system. So in collaboration with Indian Meteorological Department, we have developed a threshold-based heat health warning. So we have to alert the population, the vulnerable population most, that when they have to go to take the specific action, when temperature is going to 45 degree, when there would be a red alert. Second component was interagency coordination and collaboration, which is still lacking in many of the department. So who will take care of what responsibility with specific to the heat action plan, which department needs to take what action. For example, school department. So during heat wave time, they have to change the timing of school, and they can save lot of exposure of children to the heat. Similar to the women and child development department, and all the department we have listed clear-cut role and responsibility, and not more, 4 to 5 points that what you have to do during heat wave. Third component is very essential and with specific to the climate change and health. The capacity building of the medical officer and the healthcare professional, because it is still lacking. They are not well aware about the climate sensitive diseases. They are not well aware about the newborn care, especially to the primary health care. So we have to build the capacity of the medical officer, and that was the component. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahavir. And I think many cities can learn from Ahmedabad, how well they implemented it after having that one summer of 2010, which was devastating. But since then, they've kept the deaths very low. Now, finally, we'll go to Dr. Akash Srivastav, who heads he's additional director for the National Program on Climate Change and Health. Maybe you can tell us very briefly again, like what are the plans and how you're implementing the national program? And how do you think other sectors can help?
Thank you for the question. Honorable Union Minister and respectable panelists, I would first like to put in context how our program is in place. It's in year 2015, under the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister. the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change proposed the health mission as the new mission under this council. And we began with putting in place an expert group which was able to very quickly put in place a national action plan. And by 2019, the ministry had already proposed a new health program, which is the National Program on Climate Change and Human Health, under the NHM umbrella of the ministry. The beauty of the NHM umbrella of the ministry is that it provides an opportunity for the state governments and the central government to come, deliberate, and identify deliverables that they can achieve year on year and provision for financing for it. And as on today, 34 states have been successful in drafting a state-level action plan on climate change and human health. And we are now proceeding down to put in place district-level action plans on climate change and human health. We recognize the special focus of women and children in context of climate change, and I am glad that under the guidance of the Union Minister, this report very clearly highlights the special challenges that women and child have. To speak of a few things, especially say, for example, air pollution. Air pollution very recently has now been recognized as one of the multipliers of so many exposures related to different outcomes. Almost all health systems of the body gets impacted, and unfortunately, a large part of India in the rural setup, the women have already for a long time been exposed to these particulates matters through cooking and heating and other procedures. Thanks to the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, a lot of them have now been able to move on to cleaner fuel, which will definitely make a major impact onto their health. But there is still a lot more that needs to be done. Children are very susceptible to such particulate matter. And beyond air pollution, for example, I'll say extreme weather events. Extreme weather events, they are both impacting directly on the health of the women and children, as well as they are also leading to disruption of essential basic maternal and child care that is relevant for these women and children. They also would impact the psychosocial health of the women, and therefore this National Program on Climate Change and Human Health is working with the other existing programs such as reproductive child health and also programs such as National Mental Health Program to ensure that the climate change is accounted. Beyond raising awareness about the impact of climate change on health and building up the capacity of our health workforce, we've also put in new surveillance systems such as for impact of heat on health and air pollution on health, so that indigenous Indian data is available to guide the policies related to health. In the action plans, we've also ensured that there is a multi-sectoral task force at each district level where under the chairmanship of the district magistrate, representatives of all sectors beyond health sector, including women and child development related sectors, can come and identify solutions that are unique to the context of that given district and help the people to create solutions for the health of the women and children. And especially when I'm talking about providing care, I would like to especially think about the ANMs, the ASHAs, the Anganwadi workers, who themselves are women and all across the country are working so tediously to provide support to the women in context of climate change and human health. We have been providing and encouraging them through capacity building programs and putting in place systems so that they can help in stabilizing the situation for the
Yeah.
So in these are some of the ways in which we in the program are making efforts and will continue to learn and improve so that it gets for the better. So
Thank you very much, Dr. Akash. Thank you. Clearly, there's a lot that's been done, but more needs to be done, and we're learning more every day. So, I want to thank all my fellow panelists and give the floor to the Honorable Minister for her reflections and her guidance on the way forward. Ma'am.
I think there is a consensus today that climate change and its impact is not a standalone crisis. There has also been a consensus created around the fact that these kinds of studies, reflections, and interventions are not a sign of climate activism. In fact, are platforms where there emerges a conversation around the loss of productivity if we do not respond to climate change and its impact. My compliments, Soumya-ji, because this is the first ever Indian study from the perspective of agroecological zones in India servicing the cause of gender. This has never been done in India before, and I think that is why it is significant. One, there has to be a narrative around agroecological zones in the country, which is a popular narrative, because specialists on a panel do not make for popular impact. So one of the agendas that we should all possibly now strengthen and further is that the climate action and climate impact is not only the domain of specialists, bureaucrats, or policymakers. The impact on our population is going to be so enormous. As the Prime Minister says, it needs to become a Jan Andolan. Second, I think that my generation has seen the activist Sunita Narayan. These are the names that now need to create a repository of the legacy climate solutions that India has to offer for the global south, and also study what the global north is facing vis-a-vis the impact of climate change and how we can provide solutions, first within our domestic geography, then the global south, our friends in Africa, and then tell the global north, if you'd still like to not wake up, well, too bad, but we have at least gone thus far. The third, I think, is an much gratitude to ASSOCHAM for initiating and partnering with this whole intervention, because without industry, our interventions will be reduced to just activism. Today possibly is the first time that this is a pragmatic platform on which industry leaders, climate change impact makers, academicians, and policymakers can come together. The fact that industry is not divorced from the conversation is what makes this platform very robust. And that is the other message, because anything to do with climate is met with suspicion, especially by smaller facets of industry. So for ASSOCHAM to lead this initiative, I think, Ajayji, is again a very positive message that climate change and its impact needs to be addressed from an industry perspective also, and can be beneficial financially. For instance, in the agroecological mapping that you have done, there is also the impact on the workforce for industry, which hasn't been computed yet. There are also industries which will be impacted when resources such as water become scarce. There is no such mapping in India of the impact of on industry of climate change. The other issue is the impact of ease of living, which possibly is not computed right now, but this platform gives it that extra, I think, exponential gain. Since it's not been ideated before, at least this platform gives it that one little voice. And lastly, Soumya-ji, gender was never factored in as a separate entity of impact for climate. But what is complementary about your approach is, for the first time, we are also talking about the impact on children. So we as a gender take the efforts, the impacts, or the challenges of children along is also significant. So one, my compliments is, for the first time, agroecologically, children and women have been looked at from the perspective of climate. Second, it is a huge success that industry leaders and climate impact change makers can sit in a sense of harmony and partnership. And And well, Ajay and I go back 21 years, so he has history with many people in the room. The issue is that, like I said, climate change and its impact and people who want to work on it should not be looked upon as behemoths who are not understood by the larger population. And I think that is the service that this report does. It creates a new narrative, it sets the correct agenda, and it tells us that act now, not only look at policy, but also look at climate finance. Let's generate it from within and without. Because the time is now. You don't act now, then the cost will be exponential.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani, for your words and direction for the entire audience as well as the panel. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ajay Singh, President ASSOCHAM and CMD SpiceJet, Mr. Deepak Sood, Secretary General ASSOCHAM, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chairperson, MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, Dr. Amarjit Singh, Member Public Enterprise Selection Board and former advisor to the Prime Minister, Dr. Sunita Narayan, Director General, Center for Science and Environment, Mr. Ravi Bhatnagar, Co-Chairperson, ASSOCHAM CSR and Empowerment Council and Director, External Affairs and Partnerships, South Asia, RECIT, Dr. Mahavir Gulecha, Professor and Head, Department of Health Policy Management, Behavioral Science, Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, and Dr. Akash Srivastav, Additional Director, NPCCHH Division, National Program on Climate Change and Human Health, NCDC, National Center for Disease Control in Delhi. I also want to take an opportunity right now to talk about another program that ASSOCHAM is leading called Startup Mahakumbh, of which I am one of the organizing committee members. My name is Archana Jagirdar. And to the erstwhile panel here, there is a focus on climate tech over there. There is a focus on technology. I think one of the topics we should have also spoken about was what generative AI, the kind of power consumption that computing is taking and therefore the impact on climate, as well as other new brands. So the startup ecosystem, which is also powering and thinking about how to bring products and services differently to the country. So it's my pleasure to invite everybody to Startup Mahakumbh, which is going to happen from March 18 to 20th at ITPO and Bharat Mandapam. So please do come and attend. It's going to showcase many solutions to maybe some of the problems that was discussed here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request Mr. Ajay Singh, President ASSOCHAM and Chairman and Managing Director SpiceJet, to please present a memento to our chief guest, the Honorable Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, Ms. Smriti Zubin Irani. I would request you to please present a memento to Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chairperson, MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. Please give a huge round of applause to Ms. Smriti Irani. We are very grateful to her for coming here and sharing her thoughts with the audience. I request all of you to please remain seated. Please clear the aisles. Please let ma'am exit the hall without any impediments. Please remain seated and please clear the aisles. After this program concludes, we will have lunch and we request ma'am to join us for lunch. But I would request you to please clear the aisles and please be in your seat so that ma'am can exit towards lunch.